topic of my talk today is surveillance in the digital society. Maybe a bit unexpected, but this is not a technical talk, at least not very technical. I'm trying to find a new way to approach digital surveillance in general. This is more from a German perspective, a bit from a European perspective as well. As Judith already told you, I'm active in the internet for quite some time, since '88 basically. And that also led me to be there when law enforcement and also intelligence services took their first steps in the internet. Being active for a company called World Online in '98 to 2000, we were active in 17 countries in Europe. That came to very strange scenarios when you were addressed by the different views, and back then nothing was harmonized. Everything was local. Every national law enforcement agency had their own views on what to do in the internet, and intelligence services much worse. I mean, they had very strange views, particularly in some of the former Eastern Bloc countries. But coming back to Germany. Obviously, looking at Eastern Germany, we were very aware that surveillance might be a problem. But even before that, already in '83, our constitutional court found that those who are unsure if divergent behavior will be recorded at all time and stored, used, or passed along as information will try not to be noticed by such behavior. That was in '83, way before the German Democratic Republic was stopped their existence. That was part of what back then was called a Volkszählungsurteil. It was the census. It was about a census which was supposed to happen in Germany, which was very broad, where you had to give out all sorts of information on how you live and where you live, with how many people you live, who you live with, and so on. And that was made quite a bit smaller by that court ruling. So behavior in that case meant something different, but still this ruling is still being used today in all decisions of the German Constitutional Court up until today. They made a very similar finding in 2010, which is even more interesting. The fact that the exercise of liberties by the citizens cannot be recorded and registered in full is part of the constitutional identity of the Federal Republic of Germany. To uphold this, the Federal Republic will have to intercede accordingly in European and international context. Something we are desperately lacking. There is no such activity by our government, at least nothing noticeable we can find, where they try to stop surveillance. Even after Snowden, what we had to find out was the NSA Untersuchungsausschuss, wait a second, I was just missing the word, with the investigative committee we have regarding NSA. They found out more and more that the same activities we actually put forth to the Americans said, well, you can't do that, we're doing ourselves. And there is absolutely no activity from the government to change that. Even more, the Constitutional Court found that they actually put some mandate on law enforcement that if they want to use modern, specifically concealed investigation methods, they will have to consider the additive infringement of the personal rights and the threat potential coming from that. What does that mean? That the law enforcement will have to find a special process and how they can actually find out what is being, or how much the individual rights of an individual are infringed by ongoing surveillance by different parties. How you do that? They said, back in 2005 that was way before Snowden, NSA and everything, it has to be ensured that a public prosecutor's office ordering a filing for an investigative measure will be informed about all investigative measures currently limiting the basic rights of a subject. Otherwise, and that's the important part, no responsible check and finding of an overexposure would be possible. While this sounds simple, this is something which has been put on the table for the legislators. They will have to come up with laws and regulations which will uphold these rulings. So far, we have none. And that has not changed with everything we found out through Snowden, and you'll find out later, I have some examples there, it's even getting worse. The European Court obviously found something very similar that is from, or the excerpt here is from the ruling regarding data retention in 2014, that it basically finds that what you can find out about a person, their social network, their relationships, everything from the data, even from the small set of data, no content, just the metadata being stored for data retention, you will still find out what people are doing, and that this is unacceptable under EU law. Again, they find that this is inconsistent with Article 11 of the European Charter of Human Rights, and that is inconceivable that data retention is acceptable. So this is why data retention, the data retention regulation of the EU was disbanded. Again, obviously this holds no value for the German government, because last year we had a new law being put in effect in Germany which reinstitutes data retention. So what does that mean? Which elements would such a summary calculation, which is basically what was mandated by the Constitutional Court in Germany, when they said that you need to have that added infringement, what does that constitute of? I'm trying to get a grip on which elements do they have to consider and which elements don't they have to consider. Well, obviously they'll have to consider the orderly investigative measures, which is obviously legal interception. So individual court-ordered stuff can't really be against that. I mean, this is part of law enforcement and sensible. Obviously, we don't want crime, cybercrime, anybody to just do what they want. Strategic surveillance, different story. That's part of intelligence operations. Still, it is being ordered in Germany as well. There's we as DKIX are currently suing the German government over that practice in Frankfurt. There also are police laws in the individual states, most prominently in Bavaria, which give the police their certain rights, which other police in other parts of Germany don't have. Then the side results of targeted measures which are being given to the surveillance services, or vice versa. We have an interesting new law starting last year that when intelligence services find out something through a non-targeted measure, they'll actually have to tell police and ask them to investigate, which is a bit strange because in the past we always had a clear separation between intelligence services and law enforcement. That's even part of our constitution. But again, the law which was being put into effect last year completely disbands that line between the services. Obviously, there's other measures which we'll have to consider. I call that special measures here. But things like air traveler data that's being collected for you, and that's being discussed that this is extended. In some European countries, it's even been discussed that that if you take a train, you'll have to give your name, and that will become part of the data collection. Financial transactions, we all know that, but access to accounts, direct access by police to bank accounts, these are all measures which are there, which are which, if you look at the whole data collection from a big data perspective, obviously you can find out anything about anyone if you're law enforcement. The lines which separated that, and we had a lot of lines in the past, these lines are being disbanded on a quite regular base within the last years, more prominently since Snowden. So obviously the result and the reaction by law enforcement to Snowden was, oh, we want to do that as well. So there are all sorts of actions being taken to disband all the firewalls which were originally put in place by law between the different types of data and to correlate these data. Obviously, we all know about fingerprinting as well. All the fingerprint, or at least one fingerprint is stored in the passports now everywhere. In some countries, they're even considering more. CCTV falls in that category as well, especially with automatic recognition. Considering Cologne, for example, where we had all these, on New Year's Eve, we had these problems with foreigners attacking women. The reaction is that the CCTV is being dramatically increased, and it will be an automatic recognition will be added, not just within the train station, but in all the places surrounding the train station as well. Now, considering that we all have our IDs with recognizable photos, everything with automatically recognizable photos, that is one example of where we are here. That will be extended as well. Same goes for border controls. I don't have that here, but these are being automated as well. You're being scanned there, you're being checked there, and when you leave the country, that will also be part of the records. Car registration scans, that's one of the examples from Bavaria. They can do that there quite excessively, while in most of Germany it's currently not really allowed, or only in certain limited cases. But this is all something, or data collection, we'll have to consider. Obviously, there's other data collections we'll have to consider as well. If you take the Constitutional Court seriously and they say all surveillance or all measures being done against a person, you'll have to ask yourself, well, what's happening with maybe even private data collections like Facebook and Google? Will that count as a data collection? Is that something where which infringes on the rights in certain aspects if you can't control it? And there are a lot of arguments right now that this has become uncontrollable, that even so you might not participate, there's a lot of data being stored about you because your friends put something in there, you're part of address books, the fact that you were at some location is being recorded, even so you did not actively participate. Obviously the mass surveillance of third parties, like we know about NSA, we know about GCHQ, we don't know about other parties. It's not obviously, other secret services like the Russians, Chinese, and so on, they're doing exactly the same thing in their country. There's even countries which have that on a very popular, there's even openly, they're doing it openly, like in India, for example, that there's broad mass surveillance being put in effect about 5 years ago, and it's now even implemented. Whatever you do on the internet, it's recorded there. But also you'll probably have to consider software threats, so everything some criminal elements are doing, and when they are surveying you, or they have Trojans, malware, spyware on your PC, why would that not count? Why would, just because it provides no feedback to law enforcement or to your own government, does that mean it doesn't count for surveillance? I don't think so. I think we'll have to consider these threats as well. There are even some other activities regarding the summary calculation. So we as ECHO, we're trying to put this in front of the German government. We're trying to push that they'll actually provide us with this calculation, at least with a view on how they think this should work. There is a mandate by the Constitutional Court, so obviously we can push for it. In other countries there is some stuff going on as well. Handlungskatalog zur Evaluierung von Antiterrorgesetzen. AK Vorrat AT, so Austrians are doing brilliant job there with their heat project. The Pirate Party in the Parliament of North Rhine-Westphalia, they actually filed something there within the parliament that they want to have exactly that thing, that Überwachungsgesamtrechnung, that's the name which was given to it by the Constitutional Court, that they actually want this now. They want this from the government, in this case of North Rhine-Westphalia. Unfortunately, no party has filed a similar thing in the Bundestag so far. I believe they should do that through a kleine Anfrage. It's basically some filing by the opposition towards the government where they can ask for things. And I think they should ask for exactly that for this summary calculation. Obviously, the position of the security services is very different. They think they have no effective measures against cyber threats at the moment. So all of this surveillance, all what they're doing, they can't really use effectively against the criminal elements. I have to admit there is a disparity between what law enforcement can do and what the intelligence services can do. And that is a big problem because it's the job of law enforcement to fight the criminal elements. And in certain ways, they are much more limited. The restrictions being put on them by the law is a lot higher than what is being put on the secret services, on the intelligence community. Still, there are a lot of data collections, a lot of things you can find out, and a lot of what they're actually doing, they're just not effective in it. They don't know how to work with the data, what to do with the data they receive. And if you look at the IT environment in most of the law enforcement communities right now, it's dismal. I mean, we wouldn't work with that as companies today. Still, it's interesting to learn that they don't do anything regarding a summary calculation. They investigate each measure separately. They evaluate it all separately, and there is absolutely no cooperation if there is several different types of surveillance going on against the person. That is not even correlated between the law enforcement communities right now. There's also little to none international cooperation. There's a bit with the US, but with other countries, very low. International now means outside of Europe. Obviously, within Europe, that is different. There's a lot of cooperation through Europol. We have the harmonized legal framework. There's a lot of direct enforcement where even German police could do something in other countries, or they can go directly to their counterparts and don't have to go through some governmental channels in order to do that. So that has helped quite a bit. Still, they feel that that they're going dark. That's what they always call it. Partially, this is through encryption, but also through better, in general, through better security systems, through hardening devices. Even so, the state of security today is dismal. I mean, there's not even a secure operating system for a smartphone right now. But still, that is for hackers and for informed people. And law enforcement is not really very good in that right now. If we consider the FBI Apple case right now, I think that's a good example on how things can go wrong because you don't know from the first moment what you're doing. So have a short look at the activities in the post-Snowden area. What happened? Actually, in the US, there was quite a bit of reform. Unfortunately, most of that is targeted at US citizens so that they have more rights within the US. So yes, they discontinued storing telephone data for 30 years, and you have more redress rights. You can actually you can enforce it. The FISA court has a lot more rights now. But none of that works for foreigners. So if you're not a US citizen or outside or not within the US, then you have a problem. Very similar what happened in France after the Charlie Hebdo incident. They had a very quick new law where Secret Service can basically do anything. without a warrant, anything. They can simply go there. It's ridiculous. But in Germany, we had extensions as well. We have had the Gesetz zur Verbesserung und Zusammenarbeit im Bereich des Verfassungsschutzes. That is what I meant. This is the thing which abolishes the line between law enforcement and secret services. If the secret service has any findings, they'll have to give it to the police. Also, there's certain new types of surveillance available for police within Germany now. If they want to fight cybercrime, they can do wiretapping within Germany, even for bundles now. So not for an individual, but they can even do it for on a backbone line of an ISP, for example. Also, the obviously Entwurf zum Gesetz zur Einführung eines Höchstspeichers. That is the new data retention law in Germany. There's legal action now being prepared, and there's two I think are already being filed with the Constitutional Court. We'll have to see how that goes. Obviously, in the UK, there was a ridiculous new law which would introduce massive internet surveillance within the UK. You have to see that GCHQ so far was also more for foreigners, for data leaving the UK, not within the UK. With the new proposed law that would introduce surveillance within the UK, interestingly enough, this is now opposed. Several report groups have found this as not consistent with the way of life in the UK. Also, Europol wants access to private data as well. So the same what the FBI and NSA is doing in the US. They want to have that from data being stored with European companies as well. Privacy Shield, we already heard about this in judicial redress, is happening. That won't give you very much. The judicial redress will not give you anything comparable to the rights you have with the European courts right now. And FBI versus Apple, that was just a good case of where a company fights for us right now, but the FBI obviously did something very wrong by changing a password very early in the process, and now they can't access the data. We have some discussion of individual topics in Germany. The interpretation of the legal limitation of what they can do and cannot do by the Bundesnachrichtendienst. That is a very interesting discussion we were having for the last 2 years. They simply interpret the law as they want it. That's a novelty approach, right? So even if it's not in the law, you just say, oh no, we can do it to foreigners as well, because it doesn't explicitly state that this does not work for foreigners, even if we're within Germany. Every constitutional lawyer I've talked to so far, and I've talked to quite a few, they have the view that whatever some service is doing within Germany obviously will have to adhere to our Verfassung, so our constitution. So I don't know, but they find interesting reinterpretations all the time. So that will have to be changed. And there is a legal process already happening. The reform of the G10 law is upcoming. So we've talked to a lot of the political parties, like the SPD, the Greens, also the Christian Democrats. They all agreed that there will be a reform, but they're more about checking the bounds and the checks and balances there. Not really the technical reform, which is really needed, but we'll get there. I believe we can do that. What I'm trying to do here is getting you to think about how this all works together, that this is not just about internet surveillance, not just about technical aspects and what you can do to save yourself. It will only work if the legal frameworks are changed, if the way of thinking, how the government think about it, if we can change that. And that is something we can only do as a group of people, as citizens, because we need that discourse within the society that this is not okay. And this discourse is not happening. We're not having the discussion right now. That is the biggest problem we have, because if we don't change that, if we don't change the political attitude, whatever we do technically will be disbanded by the law. If we have encryption with a backdoor, it doesn't help. So things like that, we need to address it, we need to discuss it, and we need to think of this as a whole, as a general problem, where if we have possibilities like the existing rulings of the Constitutional Court, Why don't we ride on that? And we should force our government to actually adhere to the rulings which are already in existence. Thank you very much.